Welcome, everyone. I'm Susan Hopkins, one of your co hosts, and here with the always amazing Dr. Stuart Shanker. We are going to be applying self reg in a different kind of way in our chat today. Those of you that don't know the MEHRIT Centre well, our mission is grounding living and learning in self-regulation, which might sound like a mouthful to some folks, might sound like oh yeah, nice. We actually really believe that, and what it means is that this isn't just what we teach and facilitate and help others learn and understand for working with kids, young children, kids, and youth, which is really when how most of us, came to self-reg in the first place. But it means it's about HR, it's about how we run the organization, it's about our families, it's about adulting, me with my mom when she came to live with me. It really isn't just about the learning side, it's the living side, and those two become intermeshed in ways that maybe some of us didn't plan in the beginning, but that's part of I guess the freedom of self-reg. So speaking of freedom, I'm going to talk. I have a question for you, a topic for you today, to bring up, and it is tied to freedom. But first off, how are you, Stuart?
I am ready for planting season.
Stuart and I are both garden geeking out.
Yeah.
It's a restorative, restorative piece in our lives in different kind of ways. So we were just planning on dahlia tubers and and hostas this morning. So it's
I must
lovely to
I must tell you something. I'll
yeah.
tell everyone. Susan has this extraordinary gifts. So she gave me Monstera about a month ago. The damn thing's got another new leaf today. What do you do to these things?
My gardening is kind of a neat one because if you ask anybody on my street right now, I kind of think I look a bit like the crazy plant lady because I have no pot. But my yard is beautiful, if you like that sort of thing. But I mean, I know I have a green thumb. But if anybody ever thinks you can't change, certain trajectories, ask anybody who knew me a decade or two ago, and I was famous for killing. Ask if my mom was
Oh,
still.
that's fascinating. You never
I
told me that.
killed everything.
Fascinating.
I overwatered, I ignored. So, it just, I suddenly started
I
to
wouldn't
really,
have believed it.
yeah, no, it's true. And
Wow.
now it's like it's almost obsessive. Like I look at a plant, I feel it, so anyway, in a very good way, the positive things. So, all right, we are taking on, and we're looking at self-reg, applied to, I guess it's more to adulthood as a conversation right now, but tying it around a topic that you and I filmed on this week at your place for a cool resilience course that will be released this fall. So those of you interested in the self-reg view on applied self-reg when it comes to resilience. New science, brand new science, even if some of the topics have been, there's consistency there for sure, but it is, Stuart always takes us deeper. And then how to apply it for kids, youth, ourselves. If you're interested in that, we'll throw a link to that course that will be opened up in September. But we filmed this week, and one of the topics that came up in our conversation, Stuart, was this idea of the difference between choosing and reacting. And we were having these conversations, and it just, I don't know, there was just something new, something added that you brought into our dialogue this week that
Yeah.
just been staying with me as having some profound implications, not just again for the work we do with kids or as parents, but for our world and all the polarizing
Yeah.
politics and you name it that's going on all around us every day.
Yeah.
Where do you want to start us?
Well, with what you just said, actually. So these podcasts are sort of an opportunity for Susan and myself to talk about the kinds of things that we worry about, all of us, every day. This morning, I read the news. I know, Susan, I promised I wouldn't do that in the morning anymore, but I slipped and read about the shootings in the U.S., shooting someone who pulled into their driveway. And these are the things that worry us all. And, um, our goal in the podcast is really just to sort of relax a little bit and talk about, how self-reg looks at precisely the things that Susan just mentioned. The person who shot the kid who came to his door, he didn't choose to shoot that child. The person who shot the little girl this morning because her basketball, um, you know, went into his yard, he wasn't choosing. These are reactive behaviors. And that means, it's like a reflex. It's like when the doctor hits you with his little rubber hammer and your knee jerks up. Um, these are behaviors that are caused. And that's a real concern for all of us because these behaviors are, they're increasing. And I'm not just referring to things like, violence, but it could be, I'm deeply disturbed by the attack on women's rights. I'm deeply disturbed. Anyways, I could go on and on. But what we're looking for in self-reg is, well, what am I supposed to do about it? How am I supposed to look at these things? And I realized as I was thinking about today's podcast that we have at TMC, we have a very different view of demagogues, of demagoguery. We have a different view of polarization than what you read about. And I thought that might be something worth just thinking about a little bit, because the standard view is that, the demagogue is this person who has, a remarkable ability to stir up people's negative emotions. It's this power, this mesmerizing power to get people to perhaps abandon their deep held values or principles. But it's really not so simple, is it? There's some obvious questions that we want to ask. What were you doing at the rally in the first place? Why did you go there? Why did you cheer instead of booing? We have cases where the audience has booed someone for some extremist remark. And the reality is that, there's this sort of dynamic operating here where it's very much the audience or the citizens or the public that allow these individuals to say what they say, to do what they do. It's not just a case of we give them permission. We actually reward them. Maybe we reward them by giving them media exposure, or we reward them by voting for them. So if we didn't react that way, if we responded by, protest, by shaming them, by being outraged, they would stop. And we're in a situation today where I suspect that fairly unscrupulous politicians are figuring out that it's in their interest to be outrageous. It's in their interest, their political interest. Now, it might just not be that. It might be that there are others who've always felt this way, and this is their opportunity to come out of the shadows. This is finally their opportunity to say things that they've long believed. I'm horrified, speechless by the stories of this billionaire, what he does in his spare time. The billionaire who has been giving all these luxury gifts to Clarence Thomas. So this is somebody who's been doing all this quietly, and now he can come out into the open. This is something that all of us have to address. And I'm going to suggest in today's talk that self-reg really does reframe what's going on here, reframe it by, in exactly the terms that Susan used, the difference between choosing and reacting. So I'm going to suggest that this isn't really about choice. It's really some sort of stress reaction, emotional reaction. And I'm going to try to explain all this with a very interesting story. So, just to get an idea of where I'm heading today, if you want to truly change what's happening, these trends, if you want to change the environment to reduce the polarization, if you want to see a society that's in the throes of imploding, if you want it to heal, what you need to do is learn self-break. What you need to do is share self-break. And I'm going to try to explain all this with a little story. But first, I'll pause and see what Susan wants to say.
So, what I would like to invite all of you to do right now, and you pause this video, or if you're listening to it in the audio version, pause it if you need to take a moment to reflect.
That's good.
But I just want you to think about what came up for you as you were hearing Stuart speak. And if there's a word that came up, if there was an emotion that came up, if there was any kind of you felt yourself yelling at the screen or cheering, yay, I want you just to take a moment and notice that. And here's why. So sometimes when people hear us go down this path, and it's not just you, it happens to me too, which is especially on this topic, which Stuart well knows, that the polarization ideas can sometimes bring out the self-controlist in me, because I care, right? And we care about any any human right, transgender rights. We care, and we want an anti-racism, anti-indigenous racism, anti-black racism, where anti-Semitism, like just really all of these rights, women's rights. Like if you name a human right or anything that someone is advocating for, uh, and that it's a just society, like Stuart wrote a book on this, you've pretty much got the whole team. Our entire team thinks like this. It's one of the reasons it's easier for us to unite, because we're all very value based. We have different faiths, different religions, some differences in political affiliations for sure, some range there, but there's a lot of things that we stand up for, and we support our team to do the same. So if you heard what Stuart said, for example, in the very beginning, when he used the example of some things in the news this week, I mean, there were literally 3 young people shot because they knocked on a wrong door, went to the wrong car, or this sort of thing. And you heard that, and you hear Stuart say it was a reaction, not a choice. And that was like, you felt yourself yelling at the screen. You Put that down, write that down, and keep it. Don't lose it. But what I invite you to do, it's very much like when
That's very good.
you work with kids, because the saying, Stuart saying that there's no such thing as a bad kid, is brilliant and so true. But it's science. It's not just big hearts and soft eyes. That it is that, but it is a lot more. But neither is it saying, oh, yeah. I always use this example with kids. You've got a very heavy stress backpack. We've got a kid that we know is, in care, and all kinds of stuff is going on at home, and he throws a rock at another kid's head. We don't go, oh, no problem, you're just no, no. And it's not free for all and no boundaries, and it's not any of those things, but it's a very different perspective when we flip it around and say, what do we work on upstream? We're really trying to change these trajectories.
Yeah,
We're trying to understand differently the racism rooted
really
the
good.
racism rooted in gun through the door at a child, a 16-year-old child knocking on your door, is real, incredibly problematic. And he deserves to be, there's accountability there, and we believe in that. But we've got to learn from it. Why did that happen? And why is there, one of the things, I didn't know that's where Stuart was going to go today, but it's a really neat one to think about, because it's like, well, neat is the wrong word, painful one to think about. these ideas are actually are affecting, they're ingrained. These are problems, and how what can we do about it so that the next time a kid, your kid, my kid, Stuart's kids, whoever knocks on the wrong door by mistake, this is less likely to happen, and deeper understandings are all part of it. So I invite you to stay with us today while we listen to the science Stuart is talking about, and then let's take this up on the other end as we chat. So, anything you want to add to that, Stuart? I mean, you've been a victim of some of these isms, in your life as well. Me as a woman, I mean, it's part of why we do the work we do. We want them all gone. We really, really, we want a just society and for everyone.
Well, the only thing I'll say is to everyone who's listening and watching, this is the reason why Susan and I work together. That was really good, and that's exactly the point. The only uh, you know the only thing I want to sort of warn you about today is I don't want to do too much of the science, um, because the podcasts are more of a, I don't know, just an opportunity for us to raise exactly the points that Susan just did. So if you want to learn the science, you're going to have to do the course that Susan just mentioned, the resilience course that we're taping right now. And then you'll get more science than you could possibly want. But this is grounded. Everything we're doing today is grounded in a distinction that really has to do with which parts of the brain are in control. So when we talk about reacting, we're really talking about the subcortex is in control. When we're talking about choosing, we're talking about the prefrontal cortex, the blue brain is in control. So we have time to think. We weigh our actions. We think hard about our goals and our ultimate desires. Um, so uh, I thought of a story to explain, what we're after here. What Susan was asking you to do was really just to ask why. Why is this happening today? Why are we seeing demagoguery? Why are we seeing things that, for anyone who believes in justice, um, have to strike you as kind of perverse? Why would anyone want to give away their precious rights? Why would anyone want to support a policy that's going to harm someone, that's going to harm another? And so I understand these are you have very deep principles involved here. But I would add that I think everyone, every single person wants a just society. We all want this. And so often, what polarization is really about is these deep held convictions about how you create uh, a just society. So I don't want to see this as good versus evil or right versus wrong. In self-reg, we're really trying to go below the surface. um, we were talking in our last podcast about not paying so much attention to what someone says as to their tone of voice, asking ourselves why, what's really going on here. And I have a story to tell you that is a pretty good example. So uh, Susan mentioned how I go through this all the time with my own kids, and I'm going through a very interesting one right now with my older son. So I have a 21-year-old boy who is on the spectrum, and he is quite gifted intellectually. He has an amazing mind, but because of his autism, he has really suffered his entire life. He's been picked on by teachers or by peers. for his quirks or for his stress behaviors. And this has had an effect on him. Um, I would say one of his greatest desires at the moment is to fit in, to be accepted, to be respected, even. And this is hard for him. And it's, my heart aches when I see some of the things that he has suffered. Anyways, he's had a lot of trouble keeping down a job because he's autistic. And at some point, his autistic traits start to drive everybody else nuts. Because they don't understand autism, and they don't ask why. Anyways, he has a job now. He's quite an extraordinary job. He's working with a roofing team. So if you know anything about roofers, this is tough work. And it's quite amazing for me to see him. He's up early in the morning, out the door. He comes home late at night. It's a rough job, and he's really happy. He's a strong kid. He's very, very, very. He's built like a mountain, and he's thriving. And he is adopting the sort of social mores of this group that the other roofers. Okay, so these guys are all hardcore right-wing thinkers. So my son has suddenly become a hardcore right-wing thinker. Yeah, Susan saying what?
I know him so well. I wouldn't imagine that.
Yeah, so he comes to me the other day. I was quietly eating my lunch, and it was the weekend, and he wants to challenge me. And so he comes up with all these, really extremist, right wing tropes. And there's a lot going on here. Partly it's fitting in with the others. Partly it's, I am, no surprise, my wife and I are lifelong liberals with the small L, liberals with the big L. And so this is a way of asserting his independence from me. And, so there's a lot going on here. And, what he was saying was he was parroting, pretty much the far right nonsense that you hear. And God knows who is, he's challenging me with some video he's seen, and who knows who made the video. Okay. And your immediate reaction, or at least my immediate reaction, was, no, I'm going to explain to him why liberalism is so incredible. I'm going to explain. But then I stopped myself, and I was upset. And I asked myself, why? Why was he doing this? And in self-reg, what we're trying to do when we're reframing is we're really trying to look at human behavior through a different lens. We're trying to understand, all of us are trying to cope with enormous stresses. All of us are, we're struggling to be good, to be kind, whatever. And I'm thinking to myself, I asked why and why now. He sees me quietly eating, and he wanted a fight. Okay, so then I asked myself, and I'm listening to the tone of voice. It's very aggressive, and everybody can resonate with what I'm saying here, whether it's with their own kid or with a neighbor or somebody on the news. So then I asked myself, well, why does he want to pick a fight now? And I thought, okay, he's tired. He is, it's been a rough week, and whatever the sort of psychological or emotional factors might have been, he's looking to give himself a shot of catecholamines. Okay, so catecholamines, that's a shot of dopamine, a shot of adrenaline, noradrenaline. So this is a way of, it's like sometimes when you're really tired, you have a coffee. Sometimes when you're really tired, you have a fight. So I responded to him, instead of defending uh, the policies that I believe in or challenging what he was saying. I changed the conversation completely. And I said to him in a very soft, gentle voice, "How was the week?" Boy, I bet it was a tough week. It was hot last week. This is when it all happened. I said, "Did you drink enough?" And it was incredible. Everything changed in an instant. And what was happening was, instead of helping him, in effect, self-medicate with psychic energy, with dopamine or adrenaline, what I was doing was I was giving him some, through my voice and by the reframing, I was giving him some oxytocin and endogenous opioids. I was helping him calm down. And then it struck me that a part of him had come to me. He was hyper aroused because, there's a lot going on in his life. And he was hyper aroused for all kinds of reasons. And I won't go into why. And unconsciously, I think, he had come to me not to have this political argument. He had come to me to be regulated because he couldn't regulate himself. And so what had started as a potential, mighty clash of wills turned into him sitting down, having lunch with me, and the two of us quietly chatting about his passion right now is cars. So it turned into a very pleasant um, interaction. And it was pleasant because what he was getting was he couldn't downregulate himself. And so I was helping him in this moment. And then I started to consider, okay, so what is my, and by the way, I'm sure you can see the implications of this argument is this is what's going on today. A society that is hugely overstressed, a society that is hyper aroused, that can't regulate itself. And that's why we are getting these explosive behaviors, these reactive, it's the rage circuit taking over. That's, I suspect, one of the reasons, a big reason why people go to hear the demagogue, why people cheer the demagogue instead of shaming the demagogue. Okay, so then I asked myself. So this was the sum total of our lunch, and he leaves happily. He's calm, and I asked myself, well, what is my goal here? Because my goal is to have him share my burning desire to have a just society, my burning desire to see no one hurt, to not to, so I don't want to, somehow convince him, because I don't believe that this is a blue brain issue. I think it was totally red brain. Okay. What I want him to do is to discover his own values. That's a hard thing to do, to find out what you really cherish. I think it's taken me an entire lifetime to get to come to terms with some of these things. The big one for me was it's taken me 4 or 5 decades to realize how little I believe in ego needs. As Susan will tell you, it's totally contrary to all we are trying to achieve. But the point here isn't to convince him that he's wrong, isn't to convince him that I'm right. The point is to get him into that calm state where he can start to reflect what kind of man he wants to be, what kind of society he wants to be. I want him to find his own values, and I will respect his values, whatever he decides, provided that they are actually values, provided that these aren't just reactive behaviors where he is mimicking the convictions or the compulsions that he hears from others. I don't want him to have convictions I don't want him to have compulsions. Compulsion is very easy to plant in someone's mind if they are hyper aroused. I want him, just 2 more minutes. I want him to have protection from the demagogue. I want him not to be vulnerable to the extremist. So how can I help him? How can I help him achieve that? The answer is the greatest enemy of polarization, the greatest enemy of demagoguery is calmness. When you are calm, then you reflect, then you choose. You don't react, you choose. So, how can I help him get to calmness? And that's a self-reg is. Self-reg is a pathway. Calmness is our fourth step. Self-reg is a pathway. You do not get to calm because you say, well, I want to be calm. You need a pathway, which we explain, which we teach. Step by step, you will get to calm. When you are in step 4, you are ready to restore. You are ready to restore physiologically. You are ready to restore spiritually. And that means discovering what are your values? What are your hopes? What are your dreams? You can't have any of those concepts. None of those concepts apply when we're in the realm of reactivity, reacting, the subcortex. Every single person can get to that state if they go through our steps, if they go through steps 1, 2, and 3. The response that I have to all of these people that are yelling is to do the same as I did with my kid, is to lower my voice, get them back to calm, figuring out why they're overstressed. Are they doing all the things that Susan and I will teach? Are they engaged in maladaptive modes of self-regulation? Is that making it worse? It's a complicated argument. All I wanted to say today is I look at the news and I know that the reason we're doing these podcasts is we have an answer. And the answer is not it's not yelling. The answer is helping people achieve calmness in an age when nobody is calm. Okay?
So there's a lot there, and you were right. I didn't know where you were going to go with this story. So it's certainly one we can all relate to, whether it's your kid or think about any family dinner, right? And we're in Canada here, so while Stuart's referencing the U.S. stuff, Canada has its own version for
Well, we have
sure.
our own version.
Just a couple of things right off, and then I have a few connections to make. The first one is that when Stuart is talking about calm, he's not talking about everybody deep breathe. He's talking about homeostasis, right? And it's really being able to think and act. And he's certainly not saying, we believe in standing up for things. So, right, protests and things like this are an important part of a democracy. So you might say, well, are you just saying calm, zen, everything? No, we're talking the science term of calm, okay? And if you're like, but I read the 3 steps and I did them and you haven't done any deeper learning, you need to do deeper learning. You really do. And that's your choice. Totally your but there's no way to get there just by reading. Even just one book is not enough.
No.
We find that people talk about being changed, and they stop asking for the quick strategies and so on, and they stop asking how to change another person, which is, once you go a little deeper. So you really need more science, but then it's the reflective practice and the design of everything we do. So I just wanted to say that up front. But a couple of things that jump out to me around your parenting approach. um, a few things. Your response is co-reg, right? It really is a co-regulation, a co-reg. The Merit Center's version, or your version, the TMC version, which is part of our summer symposium this year in July. It's really about, how do we connect with that other person in these moments? And it's hard. Like, I can imagine, I was trying to think, if Sienna came home, talking about some of these. I find it, yeah, it bothers me every time I see my flag, Canadian flag on the back of a truck, and it does, it bothers me. And I know it's a statement about freedom, and then I want to get all logical. I'm like, you've got a flag on the back of the truck and nobody's making you take it off. So I want to get all logical on it. But that doesn't help, right? And if I'm in front of a person, who has a different belief than me, I have to, just even from the democracy perspective, honor that. But from a self-reg perspective, it reminded me two things. One is that Thayer matrix is involved somewhere, which we did an earlier podcast. So definitely the tension. You were over.
Yep.
He was over on the high. He
Yeah.
came in ready, riled up. He
Yeah.
needed some. But he was bordering on bottoming out with that tension through the roof, and energy. And if you'd have had a really rough day, and you'd been sick or something, and you had have responded judgmentally, like I just gave that example where I would be like, well, right, you would have been like co-escalating each other, amping each other up, and everybody would have felt like
Yeah.
crap, right? So that's one thing. But the other thing it reminded me of is those 5 look fors of self-reg havens that we talked about in the self-reg schools handbook. That's just from working in schools, because people are like, I want to be a haven, what does it look like? Well, a whole bunch of different things. It's really about an attitude. It's using self-reg as a framework for everything. But the 5 are safe. You're seeing, you're looking for signs that of feeling safe. You're looking for signs of rooted, so connectedness. So if I think of him on the roof, if I think of your son on the roof, he wants to be emotionally safe. He doesn't want to be the outsider that's standing up for
Yeah.
whatever rights. He wants to feel connected. It's a sense of belonging. Balanced, which you already talked about, was like crazy hot, and roofing is like some of the hardest work there is, and dangerous too. So stress, areas, all 5 domains, but there's also capable. So that's the idea of for you or me, that I'm capable of parenting my child through, or he's, capable of doing the work or whatever. But the last one is really important. It's trusted. And you, instead of trying to clobber him over the head with what he should think, which doesn't work. I've tried it with my own. No, I have.
It doesn't work.
Get worked up, right? And you care about things, and you just like, oh, right? And bringing them more articles or facts does not help. You trusted him to have his own. You were trying to keep. What I'm hearing is you were trying to keep your stress, your pro-social and all the other stressors around it. How he's been raised. You know what he's been exposed to for in many, many ways. And here he is saying things that really go contrary to just even
Yes.
basic human rights, right? I mean, I don't even know what, but it's things that are irrational, and yet you were able to see past that, have that compassion, keep your cool, but also trust him. And it's such an important thing when we're
That's great.
thinking
That's
in
great.
parenting,
Really
because
good.
I cannot make my child, or if I'm a teacher, my students believe anything. I can't. I can influence. Self-reg is a great supporter for you to influence. But you got to make space. People have the right to make their own choice. And if you feel that they don't, you got to work on that. Make space, because if you try to force it, especially with young people, like, they don't want to be told what they're supposed to think
Yeah.
or do or believe. Make space for it. I also think it's really helpful. It's not about never having conversations. So we often talk a lot about not talking. That's in the heat of a moment. There are lots of moments to have
Really good.
conversations, and it's really helpful. If you're at a loss, and maybe this is your kid or your brother, or your neighbor, or whatever. It's hard, right? But just keep in mind that even if you can certainly have your boundaries, you can certainly disrupt. I've walked out of a family dinner because of racism once. It was not easy to do. It was a distant cousin, but it went too far, and I'm like, I've got to go. And it was that simple, and I stood up for it, but then I had to go. So I do, you do have the boundaries, but you're not going to change somebody by clobbering them over the head, right? And I mean with words. I don't mean you might change them if you like actually did that, but it's like, how can we do it? We got to walk our talk, and pick our moments. But I've with young people especially, I do a lot of noticing and naming it. So, oh, look, you just stood up for the rights of, my kid saves bugs like me. So it's like she cares about living things. I say that, look how much you care about living things. And you're not telling somebody their values, but you're telling them, this is what I see and who you are. And it can help, because the stronger we get in our sense of identity and those values that Stuart is
Yeah.
saying, and look, just doing one of those values activities is tricky, because you're going to write all the right things, and then it's like, what do I really believe? And there's not the sets. Our values are very aligned, but they're not exactly the same, Stuart. We're different people, and we have different histories and stories that we carry with us, and there would be slightly differences. That's normal, but it's beginning to think about it and noticing it. So I find with young people, noticing and naming, especially the ones that are struggling big time, notice and name the good things. Like, notice it, tell them what you see,
That's
and and that piece of trust is such an important thing. So where do you want to go from there?
honestly, that's where I wanted to go. And let's just close on that point that Susan's just made about trust. And I want to trust this deep human capacity for compassion, for kindness, um, in all of us. I was asked a question this week about, well, what what if this isn't there? What if you're getting the opposite? And again, I'm always going to ask why. Why is it not there? What is blocking it? There are all kinds of things that block it. Pain blocks it. Overstress blocks it. Fear blocks it. So if I can do the first four of what Susan just went through, then I find I can release, I can unleash this kindness that I believe is in every human being. There are some exceptions. I can think of a few, but we have, if we truly want to stop this mounting uh, growth of polarization, of extremism, if we want a game plan for how we do this, then what we're telling you today is that's what self-reg is all about. It gets you into that safe space where you can have these conversations without ego defenses, where we can probe, where we can think about what kind of society do we really want? What do we really want for a child? What do we really want for um, a democracy? And I mean, Susan knows this. That's why I did this work, and more. I just want to emphasize. Susan was telling me just before we came on, we're seeing an astonishing growth in the people who want to come present at our summer symposium. These are not all self-riggers, at heart that came to us, many of them were the exact opposite. Many of them thought um, that this was some sort of permissiveness, and it's not. And what happened was that as they began to learn what's going on in the brain of themselves or in another, they became self-regulators. And they became that way because of how they felt and how they could help others feel. So I just want to make it clear that we're not uh, we are not somehow like appealing to those who already um, share our deep values or who share our aspirations. We want to appeal to everybody. We want to appeal to the person who thinks yes, but that there is a basis for their racism. I have met many people like this, many people who believe in genetic determinism. And we can explain all this. We can explain the effects of stress. We can explain the effects of poverty. We can, all of these convictions, we can explain scientifically. We can show what's really going on. So, but for today, all I wanted to convey was that it's time for a change. It's time, it has to stop. It's time for us all to get back to calm. And as I, I'm not kidding, as I was writing this, a text message came in from my older boy, and now he's asking me a political question. It's a question, not an assertion.
Yeah, interesting. So everything that Stuart just shared. So again, just like I asked you to do in the morning in the beginning when I said, okay, did something trigger you there? As Stuart is talking about people with racist beliefs, when he's talking about come and learn the science with us, it really um, um, pulls that apart, and
Yes.
we're really looking for is the just society and for those to go away, and I think that's a really important thing. I'm a big believer in standing up for the things that that I believe are right. I've got a situation with my daughter right now, and something she does, a hobby that she does, or it's a sport, I guess, that she does a couple times a week. And she told me a story the other day that's clear that one of the people that she does this with is experiencing racism. And Sienna knew it was racism, but I don't think she really understood. It was being covered up in a sense because the person was laughing about these things being said.
Yeah.
And so beginning to really
Yes.
think about that, and then helping her through how to respond to it, and what, and it's her choice, but like, it is about standing up for things. So I already know that I may intervene in some way. I was don't ask me about it anymore kind of thing, because I have to, right? I have to, and I have to disrupt and not just say it's not okay. But we're trying to move things forward. And so if I'm going in there yelling about it,
Yeah.
I'm upset about it. But this is a teenager as well, and so they've gotten that from somewhere. And how do I make it go away? Sometimes we get overwhelmed by this.
Three o'clock.
Those are Stuart's clocks, our videographers, the amazing Aiden and Aaron of Two Blue Shirts. So shout out for you guys. They do all of our courses, but they also polish these podcasts. So those drive the guys crazy. So that'll be just
Sorry, guys.
a little bit of dysregulation
Yeah,
for them.
sorry, guys.
That's
Sorry,
fine.
Aiden.
We come by this work honestly, but it can be very
Yeah.
overwhelming, right? Because I find thought of children suffering, and even when I see that word, things come to my mind that that
Yeah.
it's excruciating for me. I am a real animal lover, feel the same. It's excruciating. What domestic violence is another area, just excruciating. But I try not to live there very long, and the reason is because I can't help if I'm totally being bottomed out. And so what I like to think of is as my sphere of influence. And all of you can think of your sphere of influence. You're like, what can I do? Like Margaret Mead, one person can do a lot. And maybe your sphere of influence is one child, Maybe it's a school full of educators. Maybe it's a lifelong community volunteering service. Maybe it's something in your faith. And the ripple effects, some of them
Yeah.
you'll know. Some
Yeah.
of them you may never know. But for me, I'm like, there is no do nothing. There is be on the side of change, advocating for the right things, having self-reg to help me find my way, and keeping my balance, my state, so that I can be part of the change that I want to be part of, and not adding to the polarization, because as Stuart says, it makes it worse. The further that, I'm raising my finger at the Canadian flag that goes by in a truck, right? How am I helping? I'm not at all. And so we really got to keep that in mind. And I just want to end with one kind of cool thing, Stuart, that
Yeah.
is related to something you said.
Yeah.
It might spark an idea for anybody out there that is a business owner or employs people or hires somebody locally. We were talking about your son and his new job and the roofing. And that, and some of these jobs along the way he does great until he doesn't, and that's sort of what happened, I know, with the last one.
Yeah.
uh, there's a real movement happening in the world of not fast enough, to be honest with you, but in the world of business. Some of it is coming through regulations and human rights and this sort of thing. We try really hard at the MEHRIT Centre. People don't realize there's a lot of neurodivergent people, for example, in our it's not in their bios, but there's a lot. Right? So people don't really realize, beginning to think about, is it? It's just like in school. Is it the child that needs to change? Are we trying to
Exactly.
literally normalize? No, it's us. So many things that we're doing to, I'm thinking of autism, when we're trying to get a kid to stop, flapping, for example, and
Yeah.
like, why? That's actually a healthy mode of self-regulation. It's not hurting a soul. And actually, it is on your end that needs to change. And the more that we help other kids understand that and value that, the better. Sienna came home yesterday telling me this story about she's doing this self-defense, women's self-defense class as part of her grade 9, which is really cool. And the guy that's training it, he's just fabulous. I'll find his name and link it here. But pretty hardcore, been through a lot, like,
Yeah.
and but they're just enthralled by him. And he
Right.
asked a question, and one of the girls in the classroom answered it, and she's autistic, and she answered the question completely perfectly. And he said, how did you know that? And she said to him, well, you said it the other day. And so, Sienna thought that was really cool, but because she's had conversations of, she's standing up, trying to help others. Hey, back off. That's cool. Right. That kind of thing. Right. So, but I wanted to tell you something you don't know, that I hired an organization called Neurodivergent Cleaners to come into my home and help me. I've always struggled keeping up with my house. I'm better than I've ever been. But I have too much stuff. And like I said,
I didn't know this.
they've only come in twice. Game changing. And what it is. So there's other businesses like this out there. So they go in and they'll go into, they have clients that are
Right.
autistic, for example. And but the whole team, there's someone, there's people with OCD and ADHD, and there's that have real strengths, right? And like I have never met more self-reg people in my life. They made me feel so okay, and this is their, and it's really kind of, it's kind of a neat, you think of it as niche, but I don't know what normal is, right? And it's not
Yeah.
just, oh, diversity is our strength. No, diversity is our strength, thank heavens. So those of you that are in business, don't look at the opportunities to bring in, there's funding and things to bring in neurodivergent or people with differences of any kind. I really encourage you to think about, strengths. And if you can shape, that's what we do at the MEHRIT Centre. We to a certain extent, as we've grown, it's harder to do, but we shape the roles around what people are their strengths and what they're really good at. And wow, let me tell you, you're not going against the tide, right? So there's some really cool organizations out there. I invite you to share others if you've heard of other organizations, or if you have any responses everyone to this podcast. If you have questions, if there was something that made you uncomfortable or more curious, all responses are welcome, and we read everything that you send us, and we really thank you for following on with our podcast. Please share it. Please tell the world out there that the Self Reg Show exists, and we'd like to meet, broaden our community and have a further reach beyond. Our circle has grown. It's that, we've got several thousand people through courses now, Stuart. So that's a lot around the world, not just in Canada. It's around the world. But we're looking to grow and save the world. We want to save it every. We really do. We're really dreaming of being the difference maker, so that our kids and our grandkids and
Yes.
those that come after us, maybe there's a little less suffering. And even just a little less suffering would make a really big difference. So final word is yours, Stuart.
I'll do a shout out. So I got a very nice letter today, this week, from Daria Brown. In response to our podcast, she asked a very good question, and she's running a wonderful site called Affect Autism. And I just want everyone to know that um, we are not alone in this. There's something happening today, and Susan and I are proud to be a part of it.
Yeah, we really are. Thanks. We'll see you next time, everyone.
Bye.